Hi everybody. Yes, before you ask, I am cold. Today I wanted to talk about death anxiety. Now, as a death doula, I get asked quite a lot if I'm afraid of death. And my answer is always yes, I am afraid of death. I think that it's perfectly reasonable and healthy as a human being to be afraid of death. I fear death because I don't want to leave life, because I love life. I think it's very beautiful and I feel at home here in life on earth. For some reason, people think I've transcended being scared to die and being afraid of death, but I haven't. I am afraid to die. I don't know if I have a major fear of death. I accept death. I know that it's going to happen. I know that one day I won't be here, and that's fine by me. I know that that's okay, but I don't want to die. I just don't want to. I want to be around for as long as possible. I think more than being afraid of death, I might be more afraid of suffering and pain. And I think that if you were to press people on this question, do you fear death or do you fear pain and suffering at the end of life? I think a lot of people would tell you that actually they just fear the pain and suffering before death and not death itself. It's very normal to fear the unknown. We have no experience of what death is like, so we don't have anywhere to put that. But some people experience death anxiety in a much more intense and problematic way. It even has a term. It's called thanatophobia. 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 Thanatophobia is characterized by an intense, extreme fear of death and the dying process, also known as death anxiety. People suffering with thanatophobia may be anxious about the death of themselves or the death of their loved ones. It can be characterized as an anxiety disorder if it is disrupting everyday life, if the person's mind is very preoccupied with thoughts of death and dying, and it's sort of infiltrating their life in a way that is not productive, not healthy. Necrophobia is also worth mentioning because necrophobia is a fear of dead things or graveyards or things associated with death, but not the actual dying process and death itself. So necrophobia is more like fear of corpses. Thanatophobia is more about dying and death. I am afraid that I will die. I'm afraid that someone else I love will die. If it's interfering with your life in a way that you're getting panic attacks, you have all these cyclical thoughts about death and dying, if you can't sleep because you're thinking about death and dying, that kind of walks into the realm of unhealthy fixation. And you might want to seek help if you're having this kind of intense death anxiety. People with thanatophobia might go out of their way not to talk about death and dying. They might quickly change the subject. They want to avoid the subject at all cost. One study that I read suggests that the elderly will more often fear the dying process, and the younger population will fear death itself in a more broad sense. Thanatophobia can also kind of bleed into other phobias like hypochondria. I'm not sure if hypochondria is actually a phobia. But it will trigger being very afraid of getting ill, getting sick. So it can lead to other kind of OCD behaviors such as obsessively checking moles or checking blood pressure to make sure that the person's healthy, and always thinking that something is an indication that they're going to be ill and die. So if a person is diagnosed with thanatophobia, what then are their options to get into a more healthy relationship with the fear of death and dying? Lots of people recommend CBT, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT can offer techniques on how to deal with intrusive thoughts and even breathing techniques. Another therapy that can be used, which is maybe a little more controversial, is exposure therapy. And exposure therapy is, you know, what you would expect. You're exposed to the ideas and thoughts about death and dying, and asked to kind of confront them, maybe visualize about you know, your close relatives or loved ones dying, or even yourself dying, in a way to take the mystery out of them. Not that you can truly take the mystery out of death and dying. Other techniques include visiting a hospital where sick people are all around and maybe even dying people are all around, writing a will, reading obituaries, and talking to people with terminal illnesses. I suppose a very extreme exposure therapy could be coming to my center and laying inside of my coffin. But I wouldn't recommend that. A less extreme version would be doing a death meditation that's way more gentle and less intense than actually getting into a coffin and closing the lid like I routinely do. So in a nutshell, I think death anxiety is perfectly natural and normal thing to feel at times. We fear the unknown, and death is the ultimate unknown. We know that it happens to all of us and that we will reach it someday, but we don't know when and we don't know how. So that of course can trigger anxiety. When it gets into the realm of interfering with your life, having intrusive thoughts, becoming depressed about death and dying, having an extreme fear of death and dying, where it's, yeah, interfering with your life on a daily basis, that's when it gets into the territory of thanatophobia, and that's when you should probably seek some attention from a mental health professional. I hope you enjoyed this little talk about death anxiety, and I'll see you next time. Bye. One more thing I wanted to add. I was just about to leave and then I had a thought. You never know how people are dealing with death and dying. You never know when someone is having a really hard time with these thoughts and feelings surrounding death. And I've spoken about this in a couple of my videos, but I think it's very important to meet people where they are. And I think death education and dying education is something I'm very passionate about. I think we should talk about it more and more as a society. But at the same time, I think it's very important to be sensitive to those around you and make sure that people want to talk about it with you. It's not going to be received well if they're having an anxiety attack. So be gentle with your friends and your neighbors and make sure that it is okay to talk about death. So I know some of you have this kind of guerrilla approach to end-of-life conversations where you'll just bring it up at the dinner table, and you know, maybe that will go over really well, but tread carefully, because some of us have some issues, some of us are working through some things, and we all, even though this is very important to talk about, we all deserve to be paid attention to and be taken seriously in what we do and don't want to talk about. You probably know that, but I just wanted to give my little 2 cents about it, because I think maybe people assume that I am just going around everywhere talking about death and dying, but I do try to feel out the space and feel if it's going to be okay and kind of enter into it gently before I go full force on talking about aquamation and body composting and embalming and that kind of thing. So anyway, see ya. Blah.